Welcome back to the Health Longevity Secrets Show with your host, Dr. Robert Lufkin. His book, Lies I Taught in Medical School, is a New York Times bestseller. And now please enjoy this week's episode as we explore age reversal science with Dr. Buck Joffrey.
This week, we uncover the secret to a longer, healthier life as we sit down with Dr. Buck Joffrey, a former neurosurgery and otolaryngology resident turned cosmetic surgeon and serial entrepreneur. Buck's journey from the operating room to the forefront of longevity science was ignited by a personal health scare and fueled by the pioneering work of such experts as David Sinclair. Join us as Buck shares his transformative story, emphasizing the profound impact of lifestyle changes like diet, exercise, and sleep on extending our lifespan, and even hints at the tantalizing possibility of age reversal. We explore the groundbreaking science of epigenetics and its crucial role in the aging process. We dissect how chemical modifications such as DNA methylation can alter gene expression and affect our biological clocks. With insights from researchers like Steve Horvath, we delve into how epigenetic clocks can predict biological age and mortality risk. Discover the potential of reversing epigenetic age through lifestyle choices, proper nutrition, and even medications like rapamycin. Buck also underscores the vital need to manage inflammation and metabolic syndrome to mitigate these age-related diseases. This episode also dives into holistic health optimization, covering the interplay between nutrition, exercise, and sleep. We discuss the alarming decline in testosterone levels in men and its implication for metabolic health and longevity. The conversation navigates the delicate balance between optimizing for longevity versus performance, shedding light on the Goldilocks effect of exercise. And then finally, to top it off, we emphasize the importance of educating the public on these critical insights, ensuring that more people have access to this life-extending knowledge. This episode is sponsored by Cyfox Health. One of the most common questions I get asked is which blood tests I check myself on a regular basis. Well, I check 17 biomarkers, but the secret is I'm able to do everything from the convenience of my home. I collect the sample with just a simple finger stick like this. You don't need to be a doctor to do it. Then I just mail it in and wait for the results. Cyfox Health makes it possible. Use the link below to get 15% off. This episode is brought to you by L-Nutra, maker of the Prolong fasting mimicking diet. If you'd like to try it, use the link in the show notes for 20% off. And now, please enjoy this week's episode. Hey, Buck, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get into, I'm so excited about this episode and talking about longevity and all the fun things you're doing. But before we do that, maybe let's take a moment and just tell our audience your fascinating story and how you came to be interested in this area.
Well, yeah, I kind of started out a little bit like you in the sense that I was super academic background. Initially, I was a neurosurgery resident at the University of Michigan, and then I switched to otolaryngology, head and neck surgery, which is kind of a mouthful, which you understand because that's what I guess your specialty in radiology was. But I did that UC San Francisco, did a cosmetics fellowship afterwards, and completely sold out of the academic world and went and became a cosmetic surgeon for about 6-7 years. Then I became sort of a serial entrepreneur, became an apartment private equity owner, essentially, and started other companies. But in the meantime, never really kind of lost my nerdiness and love for science and biochemistry, molecular biology, and frankly, all the stuff. And the next thing you know, Robert, I got divorced and I turned, I was in my mid 40s and I realized I was fat and I was out of shape, and David Sinclair's books were on the shelf and I was reading those kinds of things, and I just completely got electrified, and that just brought me completely into this area of longevity, and with really nothing necessarily monetarily to gain other than I just love this stuff. I love talking about it. I love writing about it. And that's where I'm at now. So I'm using like all my real brain power that got me through med school and surgical residency towards this stuff now.
Yeah, it's such an exciting time in the longevity space, and your story is very familiar to me. That I love hearing about people who maybe they're gaining weight towards middle age, or they come down with chronic diseases
Yeah.
like I did, or other things, and it causes them to reevaluate and question things. And I'd love to get your perspective as someone from mainstream the healthcare industry, if you will.
Yeah.
What after reading Dave's book or some of the other books, what were the aha moments for you on longevity? I mean, we're all both of us were physicians. We went to medical
Yep.
school. We presumably learned about healthcare, and I mean, we learned about medicine and all,
Yeah.
but longevity is really accelerating our knowledge. So like
Yeah.
what really moved you in that space?
Well, my excitement was, again, really getting into the weeds with some of the things that ultimately I read, David Sinclair's book, and then I followed up with his papers and looked at the actual studies that he did. Then I went back and I started to look at some of the Nobel Prize winning work back on Yamanaka factors and that sort of thing. And a lot of it just started to make sense to me. And I just started to realize, oh my God, this is something that's really happening, right? Sometimes I think about like what's happening in this space, similar to, there was a show when you and I were kids, the Jetsons. Remember the Jetsons and all of those things that seem so crazy, like people looking and talking on phones, looking at each other, and there was all sorts of technology that's actually real right now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or you could look at the internet, for example, and all the things we can do. Right now, I feel like we are on that path in longevity, and we've hit this point where the technology is moving so quick, and there's so much money in this space. And the pathway for understanding, or the pathway for potential age reversal, is there in part because I think we understand more than ever because of David's work and because of some of these others. I should give Aubrey de Grey some credit as well as being a pioneer here, because of their vision and saying that here's what aging is, and that aging itself is a disease. And as you and I both know, in medical school, we learned structure and function, how things work when they're normal. Then we learned pathophysiology. And pathophysiology mean what goes wrong. And unless you know what goes wrong with something, you can't treat it. So for me, the understanding of where David and that research has brought us is understanding the pathophysiology of aging itself. And so if we understand largely now the pathophysiology, the cause of aging itself, then we can actually attack it. We can actually get to the source of age reversal, slowing age. But I think I would say, as Aubrey de Grey has argued, that age reversal is just as likely as slowing down age, right? And so then you take a step back and say, well, how long is that going to take? I don't know the answer to that. Aubrey obviously says like 15 years is his latest projection, 50% chance in the 15 years. I don't know if it's going to happen for sure in our lifetime, but what I can say is that we already have plenty of low-hanging fruit out there, things that you've written about, that if we follow those things, we could probably I think with fair confidence say that a lot of people could probably add a decade to their lives if they change the way they ate, start to exercise, sleep well, things like the basic stuff like that. And for the first time, I feel like there's a reason for people to really, really try to do this, because there's a prize here. If they can live longer, if we can live long enough to get to what Aubrey calls this longevity escape velocity, then you win the game, right? And at
Yeah.
the very least, you add, hopefully a decade of really quality, good time to your life that is very, very doable with what we already have.
Yeah, there's so many questions there I want to follow up on, but maybe
Yeah.
first of all, I love talking to, talking to Aubrey and Dave and yourself, all experts in longevity. And I love to get each person has kind of a different view of what aging and longevity is, even though they're all in this space. Everybody looks at it kind of differently. How do
Hmm.
you view longevity and aging? Are they the same thing? And why do we age and why do we have longevity? What's going on there?
At the cellular level, I think I'm on board with David's theory on information theory, which is this is the way I like to explain it. It's it gets a little wonky, right? If you're not interested, if you don't, if you didn't go to medical school and learn a bunch of genetics, but we all probably at some time in biology learned about this code called the DNA that codes for a bunch of genes in between there's a whole bunch of letters, ACTG, and it codes for different proteins that become traits. They pretty much design who we are. And when I was in college and I was in molecular biology, there was areas in between these individual um, proteins. Like for example, you would have a code, and then you'd have some garbage language, ACTGs, that didn't really mean much. We just thought that they were garbage, but they're not garbage. They're actually quite important, and we now know that as the epigenome, right? It is DNA that doesn't code for anything, but that is important in order for the things that do code things to actually come out clearly. And I think David's information theory is essentially that what happens is that over time, that epigenome, those spaces in between the words, they get changed, chemically altered by various things, chemical reactions like methylations, for example, unimportant. The point is that it changes their structure. And when that happens, it actually changes the way the actual genes themselves express. They don't come out crisply and clearly. And that phenomena itself ultimately results in aging. So so we have now, as I think people down at UCLA even were some of the first people to do this with the epigenetic clocks, right? Epigenetic clocks are basically showing how people, how old they are based on their genome. And the idea is, say you can give a sample of your blood or whatever, and you can compare these DNA methylation patterns, these sort of fingerprints on your DNA by machine learning, artificial intelligence. You can look and say, okay, even though I'm 54 years old, my blood sample and my epigenetics matches up with somebody who's 35 years old, right? Or somebody who matches up who's 75 years old. And the importance of that is that those epigenetic ages actually correlate extremely well with death. In other words, if a person's, 54 and their epigenetic age is 74, they're likely to die soon rather than later, right? Of course, that's scary stuff. Unless, why would you even want to know that if you couldn't do something about it? And that's where things get really exciting, because we know we can do things about it. We can actually do things, whether it's through diet modification, through potentially some medications. I know you've talked about rapamycin, things like that, that can actually result in reversal of epigenetic age. And to me, that's where the whole thing completely becomes super exciting, right? Because what's the point of learning about aging and longevity if you can't do anything about it, right? Then you might as well just go all in and just blow it up. Go out with a bang.
Yeah, no, it's so exciting. The
Yeah.
idea that the epigenome, as you say, we can measure it and quantify it, at least the DNA methylation with these epigenetic clocks, like Steve Horvath
Yeah.
did and
Steve Horvath,
others,
right.
and it's so exciting. And then the other point I wanted to amplify too, that you mentioned, that the epigenome is something that's not fixed. Unlike our
Right.
DNA, it instead is programmed by our lifestyle. And that's the exciting thing, that like you
Right.
say, the food we choose and everything else, we get to change our epigenome. And so what are you most excited about in that area, as far as opportunities for improving our epigenome, slowing down or reversing our biological age?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would advise everyone to do the things that I do, but I certainly, like you, I think the core of a lot of our aging and disease processes lies with the avoidance of this metabolic syndrome, right? And I don't know if you necessarily talk about metabolic syndrome per se, but this is a disorder that ultimately sort of lies on the spectrum between somebody who's completely healthy and somebody who is a diabetic. And it is essentially an inability to properly uh, store and use calories the right way, causes a lot of inflammation in the body, causes a lot of other health related problems, increases the risk of heart disease, increases the risk of cancers and visceral fat. um, so I think that that's probably, between that and exercise are probably, in my view, the biggest hammers that we have, right? And they're so simple to deal with, but it's just like, you know, you look at something like exercise, which I think is, obviously a huge thing. For me, it's been, I lost 20 pounds of fat and gained 10 pounds of muscle. And I can bench press more now at age 50 than I could at age 20. You know, uh, it's you can make huge differences in your life. And if people knew like how much benefit you can get from exercise, people often want to just take pills, right? But if you put all the benefits of exercise in a pill, everybody'd want to take it. And they'd pay a lot of money for it. It's free. So, so I think those are the biggest things. Obviously, there's other things that I think that may not be as obvious. I mean, I've talked a lot about sleep. As a former surgical resident, and you too, probably in residency. I mean, we never thought about sleep. I mean, back in the day, it was at least on the surgical side, it was a sign of weakness to actually admit that you were tired and sleepy. And I was a neurosurgery resident before they had the so-called 80-hour work week, which was supposed to be like much better. I did like 110, 120 hours a weekend, drilling through skulls, in the emergency department, after being up for 36 hours. I mean, that sounds dangerous for patients, but in reality, there's all sorts of literature, as you know, on not only on night shift working, but on, lack of the appropriate kinds of sleep that might link to increases risk of Alzheimer's disease and all sorts of things. So I think sleep's a big one. I think hormones are massively underrated. Um, Testosterone, for example, I don't know what your take on it is, but what I've been really interested in is, first of all, the testosterone levels in men have decreased so much since the 1950s. They're now in young men 30% below where they were in the 1950s, which is just remarkable to me. And I don't know exactly why that is. Probably food. It's probably some other things going on too. Maybe kids aren't playing outside as much or whatever. But that relates very much, actually. If you look at the data, it actually has there's a tremendous correlation between that and metabolic syndrome, right? So, I was just talking to a urologist friend of mine, and they only treat low T in men if they call it symptomatic. And I said, well, what do you call symptomatic? That's the tricky part, right? Like if you have a guy who comes in and he's worried about erectile dysfunction, yeah, that's kind of obvious, right? But what about somebody who's got a bunch of visceral fat, right? And do you call that symptomatic? It certainly could be, right? So one of the things that I like to think about is like if somebody's got a lot of visceral fat and, a man who's got a lot of visceral fat and is tired, other things, make sure you get your testosterone checked out because there's actually a pretty significant correlation between low T and metabolic syndrome, right?
Hmm.
So again, there's just so many things like that where they don't teach us this stuff in medical school, right? I mean, you have to keep up with the data. You have to look at, you have to look at some of these things and make the correlations yourself and try to look at them for you and your patients. So
Yeah, absolutely. And what about nutrition?
yeah,
We get so many different opinions
yeah,
about
I
what to
know.
eat, what not to
I
eat.
know.
It's very, very confusing, even from, you know, people who should know better, like the American Diabetes
Right.
Association or Harvard School of Nutrition or
Yeah.
Tufts. What's your view on what do you think are the important choices we can make in our nutrition to help program our epigenome to a more favorable biological age and all that?
Yeah. So this is somewhat fluid, but I think some of the basics are, I think a low glycemic diet is really key. I've always likened high blood glucose to slime in your blood, right? Like, so basically what it's doing is if you get these big spikes in blood sugar, that blood sugar effectively starts to bind to proteins that you need. We measure that. One way we measure that slime is the way it binds to hemoglobin. And hemoglobin, we call that hemoglobin A1C. And those A1C levels effectively are a marker of how much our proteins are getting slimed. And so trying to keep as steady and not elevated blood sugar levels is, I think, in my opinion, is probably the single most important thing that you could do for longevity. Do you agree with that? I'm curious if that's your take.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we're on the same page with that, and
Yeah.
and for the longevity field, at least, many people agree about that. And then the question becomes
Protein
if
is the hardest question.
yeah, well, yeah, but even from
Yeah.
the on the
Yeah.
glucose side,
Yeah.
if glucose spikes are problematic, and glucose spikes are driven by only one macronutrient primarily,
Right.
and that macronutrient is non-essential, then should we even be eating
Glucose at all.
nutritionally
Yeah.
glucose and starches in our diet
Yeah.
if they spike that? And what's your feeling about that?
I don't have I actually don't necessarily I'm not on a ketogenic diet myself, but I do think there's a lot of value, especially in people struggling with ongoing metabolic type symptoms for going in that direction. To be honest, the reason I don't is I've swung on the pendulum. I've gone from being a guy who was overweight to now like a guy who lifts a lot of weight. And there is some value, I think, in optimizing in terms of hypertrophy and muscle hypertrophy and that kind of thing. I found, at least for me, and certainly some data suggesting that performance levels sometimes are affected by going ketogenic diets. I also, for me, I'm just strictly I follow my hemoglobin A1C so closely, Robert. And, I'm always in like the mid fours, right? And we know if you're, I don't know what your typical thing is, but I would say that I would say trying to keep things under 5.2 is probably a very reasonable place to be. To me, I think that if you're not really struggling with it, I don't think you have to go on a ketogenic diet. Sometimes it's kind of hard to do that for people. I mean, gosh, it's a challenging diet. It's one that you have to give up a lot. For me personally, I try very hard just to avoid simple sugars. I mean, I'll eat whatever vegetables there are. I'll you know I will generally stay away from I won't drink any fruit juices, but will I eat fruit? Yeah, berries mostly, that kind of thing. But what I find is that as long as, and I also monitor, continuous glucose monitoring. is a big, I think it is a tool that everybody has now. You can get a patch that literally can follow what your blood sugar does on a daily basis. Follow that. You wear them typically 2 weeks at a time, and you can look at various foods that are spiking your blood sugar, right? So, yeah. So I would call myself, I think, not at all against the ketogenic diet. In fact, I think it's a good fit for many people. But for me personally, I'm just about, limiting carbs. So
Yeah. And just going back to the CGMs, the continuous glucose
yeah,
monitors, in the United States, at least, they require a doctor's prescription, but as of this summer, a company is going to be releasing a consumer version, so people will be
yeah.
able to go into their Walgreens or CVS and get one, which I think is great news, because people ought to be able to do that. On the other dietary side, so we limit carbs. Some people talk about limiting seed oils. What's your take on
Oh,
that?
yeah. I mean, I think those kinds of things for sure. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
limiting seed oils, I think, is a big one. I mean, uh, yeah, I'd much rather, be eating flat out, beef fat than seed oils, just because of what goes into creating those things and all of the chemicals that are related to it, for sure. Yeah, I almost don't even mention those things because I almost think them as obvious, right? Right. But yes.
yeah,
Your take on that? I assume is the same. Uh,
yeah, seed oil. I
yeah,
mean, my particular thing, I believe they're really pro-inflammatory, and unlike
yeah, very much so.
sugars, which you can taste, and you can when you're eating sugar, seed oils are usually replacing other oils just as a low-cost
Well,
alternative.
we used
Yeah,
to believe that they were good, like a better alternative, right? Back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, there was, it was the whole idea was, okay, no more lard, you
yeah.
know, we're going to use canola oil instead. That's
Well,
so good for you.
the American Heart Association, who was funded from Procter and Gamble from Crisco, and is funded by canola, now recommends on their website as canola oil as a heart healthy alternative to saturated fat. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of differing opinions about seed oils, but I agree with you. At least I recommend avoiding them because of that.
So what I'm curious on your take, and I know you're doing the interview, but this is something I've been wrestling with a lot,
Uh,
is the amount of protein a person should get. Okay, this is all over the board with some really, really smart people that I respect, by the way. Right? If you talk to a guy like Peter Attia, for example, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, he would tell you a gram per pound. That's 220 grams of protein a day for me, right? Who's an active, who's a guy who exercises quite a bit. That's a lot. It's really hard to get into me, right? The other thing is, now then you on the other end of that, you look at guys who are like Sinclair in the lab, or I think of somebody else that I know you've had advertisements I've heard for Walter Longo's company, right? Now,
mhm.
Walter's been on my show on Sapio podcast, and he is on the other end of that, which is basically, he cites the data and he says lower protein until you're about 65 years old is the way to go if you want to live longer. And he cites a lot of literature. And then he says after that 65-year-old point, if you haven't gotten cancer, you haven't gotten whatever, then what he shows statistically is it goes higher, that you should go higher in protein. This is completely, quite honestly, and the problem with nutritional information out there in the public is it becomes religion, right? This is something that, as a science person, as a medical person, I don't know the answer to. Right now, I am leaning on heavy protein myself, mostly again because I'm, interested in hypertrophy and I work out and I lift a lot of weights. But I don't know, Walter could very well be right on this. Who knows? Yeah, and so I'm curious, what is your take on it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I have to say, my approach has been to dodge the question, and the way I do it is, Well, part of it, it was inspired by the idea that I want to optimize in my life and the people I work with. I want to optimize longevity rather than optimizing performance. And
Right,
they're really different things. So if I'm a bodybuilder and I want to put on weight, and there are good reasons for doing that
right.
anyway, you don't want
Yep.
to be frail in older age. But on the other hand, people who are training and really doing a lot of bodybuilding have different needs, and they may even, if you optimize for longevity, you may decrease what you can optimize for in
Yep.
performance, and vice
100%.
versa. There are even, studies with marathon runners with cardiac fibrosis and ultra marathoners who actually, they have very high performance, but their longevity, presumably because of heart damage, is shortened. So,
Yeah, they call that the Goldilocks effect of exercising. It's basically a
yep.
U-shaped curve. And after 10 hours of extreme or excessive exercise in a week, there seems to be these diminishing returns. Absolutely, 100% with you. I think the challenge with protein is there's literally, the challenge if you look at longevity, and Peter Thiel will talk about how, listen, you've got the biggest predictors of longevity when somebody is older, is lean muscle mass and VO2 max, right? So that's his argument for the heavy protein on that. Volter, on the other hand, looks at it and he says, "Well, listen, you've got all these populations with high protein diets, and they tend to get cancer more. They tend to get these disease processes more." And so again, really smart people, completely almost polar opposite views on higher protein, and I'm not sure exactly how to interpret it. But I think the important thing is that people actually take these perspectives and think about them, and not make them religion. That's probably the biggest thing in my
Yeah,
opinion.
and it's good to have the discussion be open-minded. I mean, my approach has been of the three macronutrients, fat, protein, and carbohydrates. Generally, what I do is in a person's diet, when they lower the carbohydrates, like we've talked about, we recommend for longevity, they increase the fats and they keep proteins, whatever they were, pretty much
Right.
normal. Now,
Mm-hmm.
In addition to the sirtuins that Dave Sinclair is
Yep.
big about, I talk a lot about mTOR,
mTOR.
and
Mm-hmm.
and also AMP kinase is in there too. There are many of these interlocking complex longevity mechanisms, but for mTOR, certainly it's primarily affected by glucose and in the carbohydrates, but secondarily there are
Insulin
some,
driven, right? Is it
yeah,
primarily
insulin.
insulin driven?
Yeah, but some
Yeah.
branched chain amino acids do it as well.
Yeah.
So there's a
The ones
smaller
that build
effect.
muscle.
Yeah, smaller effect
Yeah.
from protein. So that gives me pause there. The other thing that I've been thinking about recently, and it'd be good to get your take on it. If we start when everyone's going to die at age 65, which it used to be that way, or at least
Mm-hmm.
statistically, you think about healthcare and recommendations a certain way. But if you're going to die at 100 or 120, you want to think about that second half of your life, and it changes your perspective. Like, for one thing, your risk of cancer continues to go up and increases. A 70-year-old non-smoker is more likely to die of lung cancer than a
Yep.
30-year-old 4-pack-a-year smoker, just because of that cancer risk. So cancer, should be considered, and I would recommend screening for colon cancer into your old age. Unlike the current recommendations, you stop at age 70 or 75, I think, for colon cancer screening. Why would you
It's
want to
just
do
giving
that?
it up. Doesn't
Yeah,
make
I
any
mean,
sense at all.
yeah, and even radiation doses for radiology,
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
radiation exposure is based on people living to 65. Well, if you're going to live twice that, maybe you don't want to get that coronary
Well,
angiogram and things.
my perspective is actually be quite aggressive, right? I am a big fan of full body MRI, for example. The Pronuvo company has done actually let me do one over there for free and talk about it. And that was a great experience. And both you've been in head and neck, for example, right? And as a radiologist, and how often like is about the cited we talked about cancer, which is typically what they're picking up on. We're trying to pick up early cancers, but like cerebral aneurysms, right? Brain aneurysms. And it's supposed to affect like 3% of the population. I don't know if that's been your experience anecdotally or not, but
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at that and you're like 3% of the population, most of the time, when I was a neurosurgery resident, usually those people with ruptured aneurysms, they were like 40 something and they were out for a run and they were in really great shape and they were comatose and dead the next day. I mean, okay, so maybe those aren't huge numbers, but if I'm that person, I want to know. And so
Yeah.
that's why I do this, you know.
And yeah, and there's a school of thought that I happen to subscribe to, that things like a once in a lifetime screening MR for cerebral aneurysms is part of
Yeah,
normal wellness that you get early in your life, because
right.
like you say, it's a small percentage you're getting it, but if you're that percentage, your chance of having a bad outcome from it is very, very high. So yeah, I'm on board with that. What's your thinking about other imaging, like calcium CT scores?
Well, the calcium CTs, the one thing I don't like about them is that they have like a 15% false negative. And, I mean, as a radiologist, you know how these things work more than me, but as my understanding is it's a matter of luck of which slices you got and which one you didn't. And you could very well end up thinking that you're in good shape, but not be. And that's dangerous. So, unfortunately, some of this ends up being like, can you afford the alternative? And can you? And so in my case, again, being very involved with this and feeling like I can spend money on this, I actually did, one of these Cleary studies here. I think they do them over at UCLA too, right? And effectively shows like really down to these incredible amounts of detail on blood vessels, not only showing if there's narrowing or but also if those plaques are actually calcified and safe, or if they're active plaques and that kind of thing. So again, if you have they're not cheap, but if you have the ability to do something like that, that is a great opportunity to potentially not die of cardiovascular disease, which I think you and I probably would agree that it's a number one cause of death in the United States. It probably shouldn't even be in the top 10 if you take the number of different things that we can do about it in terms of diet, in terms of exercise, and frankly, pharmaceuticals if need be. So and there's plenty of things you can do, or with if you do have a problem, to treat it early. So people shouldn't be dying so often of cardiovascular disease. Bottom line is, by the way, I have a friend, another physician who got that, who did do a Cleary study, and essentially did a few major lifestyle changes, and also and I'm not sure you and I agree on the cholesterol issue per se, but he actually suppressed his cholesterol quite a bit using Repatha, and 1 year later went from 90 80% blockage down to 30
Wow.
in his LED. Yeah,
Wow.
that is unbelievable. He was ready. They
That's
were going to do a
amazing.
bypass on him. They were going to do a
Wow.
bypass on him.
That is
So
amazing. Huh.
yeah,
That's a great message. Well, I mean, we covered so many interesting things here. I love the work you're doing with Sapio, the podcast.
yeah,
Tell me about that. And I understand you have a new one in the
yep.
pipeline coming about longevity. I can't wait to see
Yeah,
that. And
that'll be
do you
fun.
do
Yeah.
you have coaching programs or anything like that,
Um,
what do you?
I'm working on some coaching programs right now that are not live. But mostly it's going to be, I'm looking at doing sort of a longevity course and coaching program that should be probably live in the next couple months. But the right now the podcast is the major thing. The podcast that I have is Sapio, SAPIO, with Buck Joffrey. I have also a personal finance podcast been going for 10 years, but this one's been around for a couple years, and it's similar to the types of stuff you and I are talking about here, right? And I would say it goes into the about the same amount of detail. And as you and I know, not everybody enjoys this kind of detail. And so I like talking about it. You know, you want to get me excited, start talking about sirtuins and mTOR and rapamycin, but that's not everybody. But I do believe that this message of being able to intervene and to take advantage of the low-hanging fruit for the masses is an important one. So we've been able to, we're working on another podcast right now. I am working on another podcast that's going to be released in a few months. And it's me, and my co-host is actually a model, an actress, and has nothing to do with medicine. And we are interviewing a lot of really smart people like you. And the goal there is to create an environment where it's not just about education, it's entertainment. So it's entertainment and education. And I think most of the country reacts probably more positively to entertainment than just pure education. And so our goal is to try to spread this message of health and wellness and longevity opportunities, you know, to more people who might not otherwise be interested.
Yeah, that's so important. However the message can be delivered, it's so important that more people get access to it, and that's wonderful what you're doing. Can you tell our audience how, maybe what your website is and how they can reach you and follow you on social media and all those things?
Sure. Sapio, SAPIO podcast.com is the website, and you know, there is a download over there called Living Longer for Busy People, which is a very short book because it's for busy people. And a lot of these very basic points that I talk about are on there. It's only about 35 pages. It's just a download. So yeah, that's the major way to follow, and hopefully people get something out of it. I talk about some different things sometimes. I mean, actually this week was just for fun, because of my cosmetic background. I did all the science of human attraction. Actually, that's known, which is pretty interesting stuff. But
nice, sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Well, before that we go, is there anything we haven't covered or anything you'd like to mention?
No, I think we covered quite a bit, and I appreciate your time, and it's always fun to talk to you.
Yeah, this has been great, Buck, and I'm a big fan of your podcast, and I'm sure I'm going to love the longevity one when it comes out. But it's been a real thrill and joy to have you on this program today.
Thank you.
If you're enjoying this program, please hit that subscribe button, or even better, leave a review. Your support makes it possible for us to create the quality programming that we're continually striving for.
Can I start? Is it recording?
It's already recording.
Oh, sorry. This is for general information and educational purposes only, and it's not intended to constitute or substitute for medical advice or counseling, the practice of medicine, or the provision of healthcare, diagnosis, or treatment, or the creation of a physician-patient or a clinical relationship. The use of this information is at their own user's risk. If you find this to be on the value, please hit that like button to subscribe to support the work that we do on this channel. And we take your suggestions and advice very seriously, so please let us know what you'd like to see on this channel. Thanks for watching, and we hope to see you next time. You should say that.
No, that's good. That's just for you to say. I think that's really good. Do you like it? You want to do it one more time, or is that good? I think that was good.
Yes.
All right.
You need to save the recording.
All right.